Welcome to today's deep dive. We are exploring a really fascinating and honestly incredibly validating piece of source material today called The Relationship Anxiety Guide by SolveHera.
Yeah, it's a great one.
It really is. And, our mission for this deep dive is to unpack this very specific, often isolating form of emotional pressure that I think a lot of you listening will instantly recognize.
Absolutely. I mean, it is a topic that affects so many people, but it's rarely discussed with the actual nuance it deserves.
Right.
So we are going to look at the underlying mechanics of, why this happens, how it actually shows up in your daily life, and then a framework for fundamentally shifting how you experience it.
Because here's the wildest part. Your relationship can be absolutely perfect on paper, and your brain will still somehow convince you it is falling apart.
Oh, totally.
Like, I want you to imagine moving into a beautiful, sturdy new house.
Yeah,
The foundation is solid, right? The roof doesn't leak. Everything is great.
sounds lovely.
Right. But there was a faulty carbon monoxide detector in the hallway.
Ah,
And every single time you do something completely harmless, like, I don't know, toast a bagel or take a hot shower, that alarm just starts screaming.
just blaring for no reason.
Exactly. You are forced to evacuate a perfectly safe home because a sensor is misinterpreting, like, normal life as a literal lethal threat.
That's a brilliant way to capture the visceral panic of it.
Yeah, it really feels like that.
It does. And right out of the gate, we really need to establish a baseline for anyone listening who relates to that faulty alarm.
Please do, because I think people come into this feeling very defensive.
Exactly. This deep dive is not here to, quote unquote, fix you.
Right.
We're not offering some toxic positivity laced, five-step cure to become the perfect unbothered partner.
Right.
Because you aren't broken.
The source material makes such a huge point of this. It emphasizes that you are not, too much, you are not too needy, and you are not inherently flawed.
No, not at all. What we are actually exploring today is a highly intelligent nervous system reacting to emotional stakes.
Wow, yeah.
We're looking at why a person, particularly, individuals who have been socialized to hold a great deal on the inside while maintaining this absolute calm on the outside, might experience this very specific brand of exhaustion.
So let's actually look at what this exhaustion feels like on, say, a random Tuesday afternoon.
Let's do it.
Because when we talk about relationship pain, society usually pictures the acute grief of a breakup or like a massive betrayal.
Right, the big cinematic moments.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But this is defined so differently in the guide. It's described as a low-level vigilance.
Yes. It's that profound tiredness that comes from worrying about a relationship you are still actively in.
Yeah.
You are sitting in a place that should feel like safety, but your internal system is quietly humming with this persistent sense of threat.
It's the exhaustion of the hypothetical. It's replaying a totally mundane conversation from breakfast, like 3 times in your head while you're driving to work.
Looking for the exact moment you might have annoyed them.
Yes. Or looking at a text message and just squinting at a slight shift in punctuation.
Yeah.
Like, why did they use a period instead of an exclamation point?
Oh, the punctuation analysis is so real.
It's brutal. Or, rehearsing an argument in the shower that hasn't even happened yet, just so you were prepared.
Right, just in case.
Just in case. You notice a tiny silence, a minor pause from your partner, and your brain immediately asks, wait, does this mean they are pulling away?
And that cycle of waiting and watching and internally panicking and then trying to self-soothe, it completely drains your reserves.
Which brings up an analogy that just kept coming to mind while I was preparing for this. It's exactly like having a smartphone that is running a massive, heavy, battery-draining app in the background.
Oh, I like that.
Right? Like, you look at the home screen is beautiful, everything looks flawless.
But the phone is burning your hand.
Exactly. If you hold it, the device is running hot, and the battery is at 12% by noon.
Because of that background app.
Yes. Your relationship is the home screen, looking perfectly fine. But your nervous system is that battery, secretly draining because it is running a near-constant background scan for threats.
The background scan. That is such a crucial concept from the text.
It really is.
If we take that analogy a step further and look at the underlying mechanics, we have to ask why the phone is running that app in the first place, right?
Right. Who installed it?
Exactly. This anxiety often has surprisingly little to do with a partner's actual behavior in the present moment.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it has almost everything to do with how the nervous system has learned over decades to process emotional closeness.
Which is such a massive paradigm shift because, when you feel anxious in a romantic dynamic, the immediate logical assumption is my partner's doing something wrong.
Or we are just incompatible.
Right. But the reality is that, the call is coming from inside the house. It's about our own internal wiring around intimacy.
Your body is bracing for an impact that just isn't coming. And to understand why, we really have to look at the neurology of attachment.
Okay, let's get into the science of it.
So early in life, our brains build these blueprints for how love and safety work. If you grew up in an environment where emotional security was inconsistent,
Like maybe affection had to be earned.
yes, or if caregivers were emotionally volatile, your nervous system essentially took notes. It learned very early on that love is precarious.
It realized that the only way to survive, emotionally speaking, was to basically anticipate the drop.
Precisely. From a neurological standpoint, this involves the amygdala, which is the brain's threat detection center.
The alarm bell.
The alarm bell, exactly. When you are a child in an unpredictable environment, a hyperactive amygdala keeps you safe by noticing every slammed door or, shift in tone.
Wow. So it was actually a good thing back then.
It was. Anxious attachment is not a character flaw. It is a highly successful, brilliant adaptation to a flawed environment.
But I'm guessing it doesn't stay brilliant.
Well, the problem is simply that the amygdala doesn't automatically update its software when you grow up and enter a healthy, stable partnership.
Oh, man.
Right. It bypasses the prefrontal cortex, which is your center for logic and reasoning, and it triggers a fight or flight response before you can even think clearly.
Okay, I follow the childhood survival aspect, but here is where I kind of struggle with this framing, and I really want to push back a bit.
Go for it.
Is this solely about childhood trauma? Because, society aggressively socializes women from the time they're literally toddlers to read the room.
Mm-hmm.
Women are explicitly taught to monitor the emotional states of everyone around them, to notice when someone is uncomfortable, to basically anticipate needs before they are even spoken.
That is very true.
So are we just pathologizing female intuition here? I mean, if I notice a micro-expression on my partner's face, isn't that just a superpower of empathy?
That is a phenomenal question, and it really strikes at the heart of a major cultural blind spot.
Right, because it feels like a double standard.
It is. You are entirely correct that the socialization exists, and yes, that emotional attunement is a genuine superpower in many, many contexts.
Like he's a great friend.
A great friend, a fantastic leader, a deeply empathetic person. Absolutely.
So then why does it become such a liability in romance?
Because of the emotional stakes. In a romantic relationship, the stakes of rejection are at their absolute highest. When you take a superpower like hyperattunement and put it under the crushing pressure of romantic vulnerability, it just shifts into overdrive.
It basically short circuits.
Exactly. The amygdala hijacks that intuition. You start scanning so intensely for any sign of disconnection that your brain actually begins manufacturing clues that aren't there.
Oh, wow. Manufacturing clues.
Right. So a sigh, because your partner is tired from a long meeting, gets interpreted by your threat detection center as a sigh of disappointment in you.
So it's intuition that's been completely warped by fear.
Yes. And we have to compound that warped intuition with the deeply contradictory cultural messages we are fed about romance.
Oh, don't you get me started on the rom-coms.
Right. Think about the fairy tales, the movies, the societal expectations. We're constantly sold the idea that true love should be consistently certain, entirely safe, and completely effortless.
The whole idea that, if they are the one, you will just know and you'll never doubt it.
Which is a devastating metric for real human connection.
It's impossible.
It is. When a real relationship inevitably doesn't feel perfectly effortless, because no relationship between two complex humans ever is, the anxious mind pattern matches that friction to failure.
It assumes we're having a miscommunication, so therefore this relationship is completely doomed.
Exactly.
I want to linger on that term you just used, pattern matching, because that explains so much of the how behind this anxiety.
It's a really useful concept.
If you've been betrayed in the past or you've dealt with someone emotionally unavailable, your brain creates a template, right?
A template of danger.
So when your current partner is just, a little quiet, you aren't actually reacting to the present moment. Your brain is overlaying the old template onto the new situation.
It is memory masquerading as a present reality.
Memory dressed as present reality. That is wild.
You are using an old, painful map to navigate a brand new, safe city.
And of course you feel panicked because the streets don't align with the map.
Exactly. So if this old software is running in the background, hijacking the amygdala, We have to ask what happens when it encounters a totally normal Tuesday evening.
Right. How does that neurological panic attack translate into actual behavior in our living rooms?
Well, it generally manifests in a few highly predictable, yet totally exhausting behavioral loops. And
Mhm.
again, observing these requires self-compassion.
Always.
The first and most common behavior the guide talks about is the reassurance loop.
Oh, the loop. This is the analyzing of the text message punctuation we talked about earlier.
That's the one.
They used a period instead of an exclamation mark, or, it took them 3 hours to reply instead of 30 minutes.
And the amygdala fires up.
The panic sets in, and you desperately need to know that things are okay. So you reach out, you send a text, or you ask a leading question, just seeking a tiny scrap of confirmation.
And your partner usually gives it to you.
Yeah, they say, love you, just busy at work,
Yeah.
and you feel this massive, rushing wave of relief.
But we have to look at the mechanics of that relief. It is purely biochemical, and it is entirely temporary.
Because it doesn't actually fix anything.
Right. You haven't actually resolved the underlying fear. You just gave your nervous system a quick hit of dopamine to quiet the alarm.
Which means, like, 2 hours later, when they are quiet during dinner, the battery drains again, the alarm goes off, and you need the reassurance all over again.
And that loop becomes profoundly exhausting for both people.
I can imagine.
The anxious partner feels like a bottomless pit of need, and the other partner feels like literally nothing they do is ever enough to provide lasting security.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate here for a second.
Sure.
What if the partner is actually pulling away? I mean, how do we differentiate between an overactive nervous system running a false alarm and an actual genuine red flag that requires our attention?
That is the million-dollar question.
Like, how do I know I'm not just gaslighting myself into ignoring bad behavior?
That is the hardest distinction to make when you are in the thick of it. The key difference usually lies in the somatic experience, meaning how it actually feels in your physical body.
Okay, so what does the false alarm feel like?
Anxiety, driven by the amygdala, has an intense urgency to it. It feels frantic, heavy, and it demands immediate action or reassurance right this exact second. It's loud.
And genuine intuition.
Genuine intuition, the recognition of an actual red flag, is usually much quieter. It's a calm, clear, persistent knowing.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right. It doesn't usually cause a spiraling panic attack. It causes a grounded realization that a boundary needs to be set.
That distinction between loud, urgent panic and quiet, grounded knowing is incredibly helpful.
It takes practice to recognize, but it's vital.
Because the urgent panic drives some wildly counterintuitive behaviors, like the disappearing act.
Ah, yes.
When I read about this in the guide, it completely blew my mind because it looks like the exact opposite of anxious clinging.
It really does. When the internal anxiety simply becomes too overwhelming, the nervous system sometimes decides that the waiting is actually worse than the worst-case scenario.
So you just end it yourself.
Essentially, yeah. The person swings in the complete opposite direction and pulls back. They become cold, distant, or aloof.
It's a preemptive strike. Like, imagine it's a Friday night and your partner says they are exhausted from the week and just want to read a book instead of going out for dinner as planned.
A totally normal request.
Right. But the anxious brain interprets this as they are losing interest in me.
Yes.
So instead of communicating disappointment, you just ice them out. You give one-word answers, you withhold affection, you might even ignore their texts the next morning.
Because the subconscious logic is, I'm going to create distance before you can do it to me.
I will reject you before you can reject me. It's wild.
And the tragedy of the disappearing act is that it manufactures the exact coldness and disconnection the anxious person was terrified of experiencing in the first place.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly. And it often goes hand in hand with another pattern the guide mentions, emotional testing.
Oh, this one is rough. Subconsciously creating hurdles just to see if your partner will jump over them.
Yes, exactly.
Like picking a fight over the way they loaded the dishwasher, not because you actually care about the dishes, but because you desperately need proof that the relationship is robust enough to survive conflict.
Right. You are secretly thinking, if they still stay and love me when I'm being difficult and prickly, then the love must be real.
Which is an incredibly dangerous game to play with someone's trust.
It is. But we have to remember the why behind it.
Right, the root cause.
It is rooted in a deep-seated fear that ordinary, quiet, peaceful affection simply isn't enough to guarantee safety. The nervous system thinks peace is just the calm before the storm.
And this naturally feeds right into catastrophic interpretation.
Oh, absolutely.
The mental gymnastics of catastrophic interpretation are just staggering to me. It is the brain bypassing logic entirely.
How so?
Well, point A is your partner seems a little quiet during dinner. Within 3 seconds, your brain has bypassed, maybe they have a headache, and sprinted straight to point Z.
Riches.
They are falling out of love with me. The relationship is over. I'm going to have to move out. I'll be alone forever. My entire life is ruined.
Yep, that's the escalation.
And in that specific moment, fueled by all that adrenaline, the disaster scenario feels flawlessly logical.
Because your threat detection center is treating a quiet dinner as a literal life or death threat.
So, okay, if we are trapped in these loops, the testing, the pulling away, the catastrophic thinking, how do we turn the background app off?
Right.
How do we stop the faulty carbon monoxide detector from evacuating the house every single night?
Well, this requires a shift in how we interact with the panic itself. To give this some structure, let's break down an approach from the source that we can call the CALM framework, C-A-L-M.
I love a good acronym.
It helps it stick. The goal here isn't to forcefully amputate your anxiety, but to change your relationship to it. So the C stands for catch the observation rather than jumping to a conclusion.
Catch the observation. Okay, this is like the difference between noting the weather and predicting an apocalypse.
Precisely.
When the panic hits, the practice is to catch the thought and say, I am feeling a massive spike of anxiety right now.
But that is an observation.
Right. It's like looking out the window and noting, oh, it is raining.
Exactly.
A conclusion, on the other hand, is feeling that anxiety and deciding, my partner is definitely cheating on me and the relationship is over.
Yes.
That's like feeling a single drop of rain and deciding a Category 5 hurricane is currently destroying the entire city.
The observation gives you distance. The conclusion gives you panic.
That makes a lot of sense.
Your agency, your actual ability to choose a different path, lives entirely in that tiny gap between the physical feeling of anxiety and the story you tell yourself about what it means.
So you don't actually have to fix it immediately?
No, you don't have to do anything with the anxiety the second it arrives. You can just let it sit there. Which brings us to the A in the framework. Allow the pause.
Interrupting the reassurance loop.
Yes.
When every cell in your body is screaming at you to text them some passive-aggressive question just to get a response, you allow a pause. You literally sit on your hands for 10 minutes.
And in that pause, you ask yourself, what am I actually afraid of right now?
You are intentionally slowing down the sequence so the prefrontal cortex, the logical brain, can actually come back online.
Exactly. And once it does, you move to the L in calm. Lean into curiosity.
Lean into curiosity.
This is all about how you communicate the feeling to your partner.
So instead of letting the fear sharpen your words into an accusation like, demanding, why are you being so distant? What did I do wrong? You lean into curiosity and vulnerability.
Right. What would that sound like?
You say something like, hey, I've been noticing my anxiety is really loud today and I'm feeling a bit unsettled. Can we talk?
I feel unsettled. It completely disarms the situation.
It really does.
It shifts the dynamic from an adversarial conflict, where your partner feels they have to immediately defend themselves against an accusation, into a moment of collaborative connection.
You're inviting them to look at the anxiety with you rather than making them the cause of it.
Which is incredibly powerful for building trust.
But that vulnerability requires a lot of internal stability, which I guess brings us to the M in the CALM framework.
It does. M stands for multiply your sources of meaning.
Multiply your sources of meaning.
This is perhaps the most vital step for long-term change. You have to actively build and maintain a robust sense of self that exists entirely outside the boundaries of the romantic relationship.
There is a journaling prompt from the guide that cuts right to the core of this. It asks, what part of my sense of self is tied to this relationship's continuation?
That is such a profound question.
It really is. It asks you to look honestly at whether the relationship has slowly become your sole source of identity or emotional regulation or your entire social life.
Because if it has...
If they are your everything, then of course you are absolutely terrified of losing them. The stakes are impossibly unsustainably high.
It is a deeply human, very romanticized impulse to wrap your entire identity up in someone you love.
Society kind of tells us to do that.
It does. But when you actively cultivate passions, deeply invested friendships, career goals, and a sense of self-worth that have absolutely nothing to do with your partner, you build a reinforced foundation.
You aren't so fragile.
Right. Suddenly, a slight shift in their mood on a Tuesday evening isn't a literal threat to your very existence because your world doesn't hinge solely on them.
It takes an immense amount of pressure off the romance itself.
It really does.
You're allowing the relationship to just be a beautiful part of your life, not the entirety of your life.
Hmm?
And that naturally requires you to do something very uncomfortable.
Which is?
Tolerating ambiguity. Throwing out the fairy tale.
Yes. Dismantling the belief that love should always feel consistently certain.
It's so hard to do.
It is. But you have to accept that ambiguity, occasional disconnection, differing moods, and general imperfection are just normal, healthy rhythms of long-term intimacy.
They are not immediate evidence of impending doom.
Exactly. Learning to sit with that uncertainty, to feel the discomfort of a minor disconnection without letting it trigger the catastrophic alarm bells, is the core mechanism of change.
Wow. So we have covered a massive amount of psychological ground today.
You really have.
We started by defining the exhausting, invisible weight of the background scan. We looked at the neurology of why it happens.
Mhm.
How childhood blueprints and societal pressures hijack the amygdala and completely bypass our logic. We mapped out the destructive behaviors it causes, from the frantic reassurance loop to the preemptive disappearing act.
Mhm.
And then we walked through the calm framework.
Catching the observation, allowing the pause, leaning into curiosity, and multiplying your sources of meaning.
If there is a single unifying thread to take away from all of this, for anyone listening, it is the profound empathy you must extend to yourself.
Yes, self-compassion is non-negotiable here.
You are allowed to be someone who loves deeply, who possesses incredible emotional intuition, and who still finds the vulnerability of closeness incredibly complicated.
All of those things can exist within you at the exact same time.
They truly can.
There is a line from the source material that synthesizes this whole journey beautifully. It says, understanding does something that elimination never quite manages. It makes you less afraid of yourself.
Makes you less afraid of yourself. I love that so much.
It's a great sentiment.
That brings us right back to our starting point. That image of the beautiful, sturdy house with the faulty alarm system. The goal isn't to burn the house down or to hate yourself for hearing the alarm. The goal is just to understand the wiring.
Exactly.
Which leaves me with a final thought. I want you, the listener, to carry with you after this deep dive ends.
Let's hear it.
We spent a lot of time today discussing how your anxiety is essentially just your highly intelligent nervous system trying its absolute best to protect you based on very old, very real wounds. So if that is true, how might your romantic relationships fundamentally transform if you started treating your own anxiety with the exact same patience, deep curiosity, and unconditional love that you were so desperately trying to offer your partner?
That is where the real work begins.
It really is. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Take care of yourselves, and we'll catch you next time.